Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Blackburn. I'm a wine educator and work for learnaboutwine.com as well as my family's store called themerchantofwine.com, where we ship wine all over the place so that you can taste some great wines with us here on Zoom. I'm very excited to be able to teach and discuss some great wines, cheese, and chocolates tonight. I've always believed that this is a wonderful trilogy to be able to share. Some people do not believe that wine and chocolate go together. I've always famously said I don't like those people, but I do really think that that wine and chocolate do go very nicely together. I think they're a lot of similar traits. They're a product of a place. They're both fermented. Yes, that's right. You ferment cocoa beans, then you roast them, whereas wines ferment, and then we put them in a roasted barrel. We age wines, whereas chocolate is slowly cooked, and it's about the cooking process, the slow evolution and the continuation of the process, which is lengthy. And you have to be patient to make great chocolate. You have to have the right tools and equipment. And all these things kind of line up exactly the way you make wine. There's also an artistic element to it, a flavor band, a profile that you're looking for. And that's where wine is interesting too, because winemakers, we make some choices. We do keep everything as natural as possible. Same thing with chocolate. But what one winemaker thinks is a little tannic, another might think is a little sweet. And these are the type of subtleties that really make every wine in the world just a little bit different and have a little different attitude. I also believe that every vineyard has a little different perspective. So there's so many variables in there that make the whole wine world go around. Now, we've got a small audience tonight for this program. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But I do this because I love to. Introduce people to new things, make this video, and let you know that I teach these classes live in Los Angeles. And we work with the Beverly Hills Cheese Store to get some amazing cheeses. And we travel the world to find amazing chocolate. And I'm going to present the small group that's here tonight a really special lineup of wine, cheese, and chocolate made especially for this evening, knowing that we're going to be a little smaller, a little more restricted in the size. I made it a little more special. So I hope you enjoy our presentation, and let's begin. Now, the way I like to start is to build the plate. And I am now thinking, I don't know if I shared with everybody the picture of my plate. So I want to be able to do that. It's going to take me a moment. But there it is. Let me get that up. If I get that up there. Where'd you go? Try that again. I'm hearing it. I just don't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Boom. There it is. Let's see. Let's stop the share. I'm going to go to a different share. There's the picture of my plate. We've got 3 cheeses, multiple chocolates, a little dried fruit for the center. The cheeses are going to be tasted in order. The first cheese got translated to Flowers Soft, but that's not the name of it. We'll talk about that in a second. Comte, a little Stilton. And then here comes the contraband, because we imported this chocolate from all over the place. Patrick Roger from Paris, Dibov and Gallet, from Paris, one of the original chocolatiers of France. Amade, um, been listed by the Robb Report as the best chocolate in the world, from Italy. And from Los Angeles, John Kelly. And we'll see how it all stacks up. Some of these are confectioners, such as our chocolate ganache and our finished chocolate with the sea salt. But these two centerpieces are both pure chocolate and not confectionaries. There's a difference. Chocolatiers make chocolate. They take the beans, roast them, make the preparation. We'll see a video in a second. Whereas confectioners are making candy, and they could actually buy chocolate. And many of the biggest chocolate companies are actually more confectionaries than chocolatiers. Some some confectionaries are also chocolatiers, but not all of them. Not everybody that makes candy makes chocolate. All right, back into the serious stuff. Kent, you ready? Here we go.
I need a couple of minutes to set up my plate. If you go back to that picture real quick.
Sure, buddy. No problem. Let me do that. I'm hoping Natalie gets on here too. Satsuko, thank you for joining us from Japan. Natalie's supposed to be here, and I think one more. So we're just getting started. 7:10. So maybe this will just be viewed on Facebook at a later moment. But this is how I've got my plate set up. Ah, she says she's in the waiting room. Let me see. Hi, Natalie. I'm sorry I didn't see that. I think I was because I was downloading this picture to get everybody up to speed on the plate. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, no worries. I was sitting here and I'm like, you know what? Actually, I might have his number. Came in handy.
Glad you did. So this is how I set up my plate, and we're going to be going in this order. When I delivered your cheeses, they each had a label on them, and probably the chocolates did not. But we'll be going from the ganache to the coin to the Amade to the John Kelly. Now I'm going to taste actually the first cheese is actually called Alpen like Alps, Alpen Bullman. And it translates to flowers soft. When we put it onto the into the Google to build soft flowers cheese from the Alps, basically. So that's how we made it onto the sticker. Flower soft. Then Comte from out near the Jura in France, and then England with Stilton. Patrick Roger is a artist in Paris. A recent contraband brought back in early January. Brought that back in early January. Dubov and Gallet, the coin on the plate. Amade, from Italy, and John Kelly sea salt, made in Los Angeles. So and I'll be reminding you of this along the way. Trust me, we've got the whole slideshow ready for us. So without any further ado, I'm going to go into the slideshow now and show you our program tonight. Wine, cheese, and chocolate is something I've done for a long time. I believe that it's a wonderful way to expose people to the great trilogy of amazing flavors and things. And I really enjoy learning about cheese. I just wish there were more restaurants that had a cheese cart or, it's a cheese expert that would come and teach you about the cheeses of the world, because it's so fascinating. And I believe there's like a parallel mindset between cheese and wine, chocolate and wine. They're all products of a place. They all have a process, and that process elevates the product to what we get to enjoy. They all have that in common. So let's start with our first cheese, which is the flowers and the wine from the Alps covered in flowers. I hope you were able to determine which one that was. Did you guys get that okay? Kent, did you figure that one out?
Yes, I did.
All right. And then wine number one, which is special. And I'll tell you about the wine in just a moment, but taste slowly as we're watching a little video about how cheese is made, and it's not exactly applicable to this particular cheese, but all cheeses. It's a very nice made video from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Its soil, topography, and climate combine to create the perfect terroir for producing the world's best milk. So it's no surprise that over 1,200 of the world's greatest cheesemakers call it home. Now, what'd you know? Here are 5 of the all-time greats right now. But how do they create all those award-winning masterpieces of complex flavor and texture, celebrated the world over? Let's explore the 5 steps of cheesemaking and learn how to make the greatest cheese in the world. Great cheese starts with one essential ingredient.
It's all about the milk.
The milk.
The milk.
So it's no surprise that Wisconsin, America's dairyland, is home to mind-blowing varieties of award-winning cheeses. Once the farm fresh milk arrives at Henning's Wisconsin Cheese in Kiel, Wisconsin, it's lab tested for freshness, safety, and to ensure no antibiotics are present. Then, master cheesemaker Carrie Henning has it swiftly pasteurized at 161 degrees for 15 seconds. After pasteurization, the fat content of the milk is optimized for the particular cheese it's being used to create. Cheesemakers call this step standardization. It takes about 10 pounds of milk to make 1 pound of cheese.
What might be real subtle when you're drinking the milk gets to be concentrated 10 times when we're making cheese.
It's a good thing we're in Wisconsin, where we produce the finest milk in the world. It's 2 in the morning at Edelweiss Creamery in Monticello, Wisconsin. Master cheesemaker Bruce Workman is hard at work adding a starter culture of bacteria to the milk, marking the beginning of its much anticipated transformation.
If I want a really sweet cheese, or if I want something that's a little bitter, I can make the cheese a little bitter by changing the starter cultures to it.
The culture turns the milk's lactose, or milk sugars, into lactic acid. Then, Bruce's son Ben adds the enzyme rennet, kickstarting the coagulation of the milk. Coagulation is simply the thickening of milk proteins. But to a cheesemaker, it represents one of cheesemaking's most beautiful and dramatic dances.
Like a waltz, a foxtrot.
Hop and lock.
Within 30 minutes to 2 hours, the milk solids have bound together to form an extraordinarily soft and pillowy mass. This, at last, is the glorious curd.
Curd is the word.
The word that I heard. Awesome.
At Carr Valley Cheese Company in Laval, Wisconsin, master cheesemaker Sid Cook and his crew are hard at work cutting the curd. The smaller the curd, the more whey is released and the harder the cheese will be. After cutting, the cheesemakers often cook the curd while draining the whey.
When we're doing the cheddaring process, we're cutting the curd by hand with knives.
Then the mats of curd are flipped and stacked over and over. Harder, drier cheeses like Parmesan are cut into smaller curds, sometimes as small as a grain of rice, while softer cheeses such as fresh mozzarella are cut into larger walnut-sized curds. At Widmer's Cheese Cellars in Theresa, Wisconsin, master cheesemaker Joe Widmer and his crew perform the thousands of years old tradition of salting and forming the cooked curd. Salt is incorporated in various ways, sprinkled directly into the curd, added to the surface of the cheese, or in the brine that some cheeses are steeped in. Salt enhances flavor, develops texture, helps to draw moisture from the cheese, and is also a natural preservative. At this stage, Wisconsin cheesemakers add other delicious things to their cheeses.
Things like herbs.
Fenugreek.
Caraway.
Tequila.
Secret ingredients.
The harder a cheese is pressed into its form, the more whey is released and the firmer it will ultimately be. This is when a good deal of the curd knitting, the bonding of the cheese curds, occurs. With Widmer's Wisconsin brick cheese, actual bricks are used to press the cheese.
Well, brick cheese was invented in Wisconsin. When my grandfather, who was a Swiss immigrant that came over in 1905, he bought a batch of bricks. To this day, we're still using the bricks.
If a cheesemaker is crafting blue cheese, this is when they pierce it to introduce air so the mold can grow and promote interior veining. We've now arrived at Marika Gouda in Thorpe, Wisconsin, as well as at one of the most distinguishing stages in our cheesemaking story, the final step, known as finish and affinage. This is when Wisconsin cheesemakers honor a heritage of hands-on attention.
Every day we pick our wheel, we flip it, we clean it with water and vinegar, and that happens with every single cheese. So there's a lot of hand labor involved.
At this stage, the cheeses ripen in temperature and moisture-controlled aging rooms.
In the aging room, that's where all the magic happens.
Fresh cheeses are ready soon after being made, while hard cheeses can take some time to ripen. That's why aging can range from several weeks to several years.
Geduld is een schone zaak.
Throughout the aging process, cheeses such as cheddar ripen from bacteria distributed throughout, while washed rind cheeses such as Wisconsin brick are surface ripened. Cheesemakers scrub and brush these cheeses with salt, brine, molds, bacteria, or yeasts to develop complex and often pungent flavors from the outside in. Testing the milk and filling the vat, adding culture and rennet, cutting and cooking the curd, salting and forming, and finish and affinage. With these 5 steps, the best milk on the planet, and more than 150 years of tradition, Wisconsin cheesemakers craft over 600 different types and varieties of cheese. They never stop striving to imagine, create, and recreate the greatest cheese in the world.
Voila. All right. Now we're having that first wine with a very special cheese. And I will say, that Wisconsin video, while almost funny because it was so kitschy and, Sunday, 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 but it did a fun job of keeping you in, paying attention to the producers. And those were some serious producers, some really great cheese producers. And I've used almost all of their cheeses in my presentations over the years. Today, we're tasting 3 of my very favorites. Cheese number 1 is called Alpenblumen, and this is what I have been buying for the past 6 months and taking it to parties. It's beautiful in presentation, although on a small piece, it's hard to see that decoration on the outside. So you do have to buy a pretty significant slice to be able to get any kind of floral pattern on the outside. But you can eat the outer floral dried mass. Some people don't like to eat the outside of the cheese. I get it. It's fine. I do. Not even because I always think it's the best part. I just think it's a different expression. And if we're not supposed to eat it, then it doesn't taste good. But if in this particular situation, I think it adds some texture and some character and some spice and some really nice, a really nice flavor. The center of this cheese, though, is the star. And let me go to the next slide and I'll come back and talk about the wine. But this is about 7 months of age, coated with marigold, rose, parsley, cornflower, rosemary, oregano, lavender, ginger, paprika, onion, garlic. What you can eat all that. And the herbs and flowers add a pleasant flavor to the smooth, semi-firm paste, which tastes like almonds, caramelized onions, and butter. You could grate this cheese onto savory muffins or quiche or fondue. Just have a slice with a cool wine, white wine perhaps, and that's what they're recommending. What wine did I pick? Well, being this was a special presentation and I wanted to show some pretty special wines, I went and I thought about the wine category. I could have picked Gewürztraminer or Riesling or potentially something like champagne. Doesn't travel very well, so I didn't do that. But I went to Chenin Blanc, and Nicolas Joly is one of the world's leading authorities on biodynamic and natural winemaking. So what you have in front of you is not only one of the most sane wines of the world, but one of the most insane wines of the world as well, because this guy is a legendary wine producer. Coulis de Sirent is the name of the wine. This is one of a few different wines that he makes in the Loire Valley. Artistically, he's considered one of the greatest wine producers on the planet. It has its own AOC, its own appellation of origin control, Clos de la Coulis de Sirent. And this is a property that is farmed and held by the Joly family. It is pure Chenin Blanc. It's about 7 hectares, about maybe that's 18 acres. These vines are 40 to 50 years old. They're steep slopes with a southern exposure. The soil is composed of shale outcroppings known as schist, interspersed with quartz. The site on which the vines are planted has remained under vine since 1130. Unparalleled in intensity and complexity, the energy of the property is bottled in this iconic and limited offering that will develop for years to come. And this wine is bottled without any additional sulfur. So it continues to change and progress. As we looked at the wine today, it almost has taken on like a little bit of an amber color. The nose has several like almost apple and I would say cider references. There's a little bit of a kiss of VA, which I think is very volatile acidity, which is it might smell a little bit like a kiss of vinegar. And that's all kind of part of the format of this wine maturing. This wine is a 2020. It's still considered fairly young, but will continue to advance over time. And I think it'll be a pretty wild ride there, with the 2020 vintage being super warm, super dry, and really made some. There's also kind of a obvious note of sweetness. Every year is a little different. This is not a wine that's made to be the same every year. This is a vintage expression, very natural, very artisan, very hands-on, historic beyond belief. You know, the vineyard has been making great wine since the 1100s, and Nicolas Joly has been in control of this property for a very long time. So it's just something special, something rare. And on the website, if you were to go to Merchant of Wine, you could go up to the corner, type in Joly, and you would see that I have 3 different cuvées. This is the more expensive of the 3, at $140 a bottle. This is a collectible, and can be impossible to get. I was fortunate to purchase these during the dark days of COVID when they came in, because if other restaurants were in business, I probably wouldn't have been allowed to buy any, to be honest. The wine world is very protective of their classics, and wine stores don't usually get these wines. They go to the Michelin star restaurants, and there's, dozens of bottles brought into California. So I took what I could get my hands on. I won't tell you how many bottles I got, but I do have some. And I was aggressive during those days, those dark days of the pandemic. I was buying anything I could get my hands on that I knew would be difficult in the future. I also will be reminding them the next time I need some that, hey, I bought it during the pandemic. You need to give me a little bit of love. I hope you enjoyed the first wine. I know it's a little different ride, and it's maybe not the perfect classic expression that anyone's expecting. I don't know if you could ever expect a wine to taste like this, but it's wild, it's alive, it's got a sweetness, a dryness, a punctuated tartness. I think it works really well texturally with the wine, with the cheese, and is quite a fun pairing. Comments or questions? What did you think, Kent? Did you mind that wine?
I thought it had a great apple long finish. Really, really long. I couldn't figure out what it was because the finish was astounding.
Yeah, that's the Chenin Blanc, the acidity. Certainly, these grapes are allowed to get pretty ripe, but all natural fermentations. Alcohol on the label says 14.5, but that's kind of where the yeast get tired. And with this ripe fruit, it did leave a little bit of unresolved, or we call it unfermented sugar, basically. RS. It is but it is part of this of the program with this wine. doesn't inoculate, doesn't try to make it bone dry. Yeah, that finish is pretty spectacular, lengthy. And I like to get lost in a bottle of wine like this and try to figure it out a little bit. It's just kind of like a cosmic little ride with a wild artist. Moving into cheese number 2. Cheese number 2, Comté. Comté is one of the great classic cheeses of France. It is really got some of the highest standards in the cheese industry. The animals have vast uh, pieces of land to roam, and there's about a full hectare, 2.3 acres per animal to be able to graze and eat the different vegetation and flowers, which is what makes this cheese. It's a hard cheese. It's can potential for aging is vast. You do tend to pay for time. And so they may tell you this is a 12-month Comté, 24-month Comté, 36, 48, 60. And that price will increase because the cheese gets a little smaller, the cheese gets harder, and the flavors get more intense. This is a 24-month Comté from the Beverly Hills Cheese Store. On the firmer side. It's a DOP. 83 distinct flavors in Comté, including apricot, chocolate, butter, cream, grilled bread. Those are just some of the ways to describe what your smell. Don't forget to smell the cheese actually, because this really does have the aromatic that tells you how complex this cheese is. It definitely can play with your imagination a little bit, and you can get lost in some of those aromatics. Known to go well with kind of similar white wines like we just had with our Alpine cheese from Switzerland. Riesling, Muscats, Gewürztraminers. These white wines love cheese. But today, because we're of this program, I wanted to show it's just something a little different, a little fun. And I'm going to encourage you to take a few bites of those dried fruits with the Comté and have it with the Beaujolais. That's what we're going to drink that Comté with. I'll show you the picture of it first. This is Moulin à Vent, a absolutely teeny little producer, kind of in the same ethos as Nicolas Joly, super natural ferments. I love this wine. I love Beaujolais. This is a 2019. And I love having Beaujolais with a little bit of bottle age on it, especially when they use stem inclusion. This is stemmy, earthy. Lots of minerality shining through. Some old vines growing in granite. Classified as a Moulin à Vent. when you smell this, I can just smell the dried flowers. This town has so much mustard growing through the hills, especially in and around April, that it's just like this amazing yellow flower popping out everywhere. And I can smell all kinds of tea-like aromas, some herbs, some vegetable type of smells, the stem, some wood, some vanilla. I think Beaujolais is really seeing some of its best days at the moment for quite a while. And this is just a really super little producer.
Ian,
Yeah.
is this a regular identified wine or is it a bulk process with the
Yeah, this is not done like a bulk Beaujolais at all. This is done like a great Burgundy, where the wine is put in whole clusters are put in large wood uprights. They tread on the grapes, whole cluster, let the fruit ferment. After fermentation, everything is pressed off and removed.
it's a big difference.
Yeah, big difference. This is made really slow. And frankly, you can drink these wines really young, but this thing is like gonna get better and better for like the next 5 to 10 years. And this is one of my favorite little wines to take out for dinner. I mean, you can imagine it with Thanksgiving dinner being so good with stuffings and cranberry sauce and turkey and gravy and all that stuff. But it's good with everything. This is like great with a burger, great with meatloaf. Roasted chicken, barbecue. It really has a lot of application. And again, super teeny producer. A lot of people have not heard of this producer. Only a couple hundred cases are brought into America. The brand is Smith Chappelle, and they're on my website. So let's take a look at that. Go to Merchant of Wine. $29.95. And because it doesn't have one of those, Kermit Lynch made about 5 producers really famous, importing them into the Berkeley wine and food scene. Those wines sell for north of $50 now. I would put this in that class. One of those producers, in fact, that Kermit Lynch made famous was LaPierre. And David Chappelle worked at LaPierre. So that's why we're getting so much similar quality here. And just a super little brand to be able to find. Don't have many opportunities to taste it with people. I probably will drink as much of this wine as I will sell, unless you guys get involved, because I am the only one that knows about it. And yeah, I take it out and I turn some people onto it, sell maybe a case, I order another case. But it's not the fastest mover, and that's okay because this wine really does have the ability to age. I hope you enjoyed that with the connecting it with through the dried fruit onto the Comté. How did that work out, Natalie?
Great. I love Gamay. So this is, yeah, I love it. It's just the right amount of kind of herby earthiness that gives it a little bit of a funk that I love.
Me too. Me too.
And for $30, like,
We continue. Time for chocolate. So we'll put our third cheese aside for a second. We'll take a step back and let's talk about chocolate. This time you can take a teeny little bite of that little ganache. And our wine is this super serious Malbec that I'll tell you about in a moment. But let's learn about how chocolate is made by watching this cool video. This is made for another brand, but they do a good job of showing the process of making artisan chocolate.
I'm Nate Hodge, the head chocolate maker and co-founder of Rocca Chocolate, and we're at our chocolate factory in Red Hook, Brooklyn. So the cacao pods are cut open and there's a mixture of fruit surrounding the seeds of the cocoa tree. Those are scooped out and generally put into sacks so that they can be taken somewhere to be fermented. This is a repurposed juicer that has a custom casing and set of blades for cracking cocoa beans. We use them for separating the shell from the nib, like this, just pure nib. And what we want to do is start to refine this so that we can turn it into gooey, shiny, rich chocolate. These are like Indian spice grinders that are used for chai, curry. These have been repurposed for cocoa. We'll run it overnight and then we'll add sugar in the morning. This is after it's gone through the roller mill behind us. This is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. And then eventually you'll start to see like sugar granules coming out. And then the machine will start grinding the solids. You want to recoat all the particles in fat and you want to reshape those particles. So since it's coming through here in a really tight space, it's flattening the particles. And that's great. We want small particles. But what we also want are particles that are rounded into a pearl shape so that it rolls off your palate instead of like sticks to it. So they're going to run this through 3 times, and by the end, it's just going to be like a big knot of chocolate. So after the chocolate has been massaged and aerated, then we're going to do this, which is the process of tempering the chocolate. So it's aligning the polymorphic crystals in the fat and the solids so that they all harden at the same temperature. Cocoa bean is roughly 50% cocoa powder, 50% cocoa butter. Because we have 50% essentially of pure fat, we like to play with that fat. Hector's steeping chanterelles in cocoa butter. In the holding tank, we'll add a lot of the other flavoring, deep herbs or teas. We really want that like incredibly silky texture. And being able to flavor the butter and then add that back in, it doesn't affect the texture. So then we'll roll the racks into this box. Humidity and chocolate don't mix. So it goes in there at like a dry 55 degrees for the chocolate bars to set perfectly. Rolled out, stacked up over here, put into these white bins. And then this is our wrapping machine. We're doing like 1,600 to 2,000 bars a day.
Oh, yes.
All right. Back to our pairing. So the chocolate I'm showing you today is this super hip French brand called Patrick Roger. And I want to give credit where credit is due. My wife goes on these kind of culinary deep dives to find people like this guy who's looks like he's quite a character. He is part sculptor, artist, musician, and chocolatier. So he does everything in a really serious and beautiful way. Featured here on Dominic Dominic Ansel's website as well. A lot of good critical stuff coming out. This producer's definitely got kind of an artsy bend. The chocolate came in a really cool little metal box. And when I open that up, there is a whole row missing because that's what we're using today, the ganache. And then these other flavors in here will get consumed over the next couple of days. But haven't even tried the jelly filled yet. There's one here with some peanut butter, and there's some other things happening. But this is the container that came in from Paris. About €5 per piece. Little ganache is being served with a beautiful red. Hope you guys are able to get some of that in the glass. Where's been? Let's go for it. This is about 55% cacao. So we started off with something a little more generous, almost milk chocolate like, with a really nice richness to it. I wanted to come at it with a pretty big fruit oriented red. Could have come in a little softer, but we just went from Beaujolais, so I wanted to step it up. I didn't want anything too acidic. I wanted something pretty fragrant, really push out those fruit flavors. I really think the fruit is the connection here with that sweetness and that softness and that plushness of the milk chocolate ganache. The wine itself is one of my favorites to introduce people to. This is made by a really great brand in Argentina. It's called Diamandes. I have showed this wine on one occasion in the past, so Natalie, you may remember this one. It was a while back with our Andes presentation. I took a pretty significant position on this wine just recently because the brand is going to totally deck us out when we go to Argentina with the group. And I really love this 17 vintage, and the 18, 19 wines are considerably more expensive. They're going to take a while to come around, and the 17 is just super generous. This is 94 points, James Suckling Aromas of black cherries, black currants, violets, and mocha. It is medium to full bodied with a firm, sleek tannins, smooth and silky, with layers of spiced black fruits and dark chocolate, long and layered. I love Malbec with chocolate. I think it's one of the more chocolate friendly varietals. You could probably pick any Argentine Malbec and have good success. But there's something about their styling. It's a little bit more um, Bordeaux styled. They do use a judicious amount of wood. This is the house behind Malectric. Oh, darn it. I'm going to say it wrong. Let me get it. Let me pull it up. And Malarctic. How do I say it? There we are. Malartic Le Gravière. That is a really important house in Graves. They invested in Argentina in the Clos de la Siete property. And that's another place that we'll be visiting on our trip to Argentina, which will be in October. If anybody wants to come, we have 2 spots remaining on that trip. We travel hard and fast across a lot of territory, covering some amazing sites, going from Buenos Aires to Salta, Salta to Mendoza, Mendoza to Patagonia, if you want to come with us to Patagonia as well. But this wine, Diamantes, $38.95. Future vintages approach $50 to $60. So I was really able to take advantage of some great pricing and be able to keep this wine a top value in the store from a top house. And I may have the lowest price in the country. 75% Malbec, 25% Cabernet. How do you like that pairing?
Yeah, I love the ganache. Woo.
Me too. It's so creamy. And the length. And just like it's like a minute later, it's still melting in my mouth. Mm. And I think a soft wine might get buried by this chocolate too. I really think you need to have a little bit of a pop to a little concentration. So I wanted to step it up a little. Hope you enjoyed. We'll do one more chocolate. Next on your plate are these spectacular coins from this really important historic chocolate producer. Really great packaging, amazing stores. This is like shopping for jewelry, going to this chocolate shop. You have very formally dressed ambassadors, I'll call them, with their white gloves, pulling the chocolates out of the drawers. Everything's in beautiful packaging, lots of detail. This is historically an important brand as well as a significant one in quality. Chocolate coins were first developed for the Queen Marie Antoinette in order to ease her distaste for taking medicines. She was delighted with them that Monsieur de Boive, the person who makes this chocolate, was commissioned to create an entire collection called the Pistoles de Marie Antoinette. And that's what you're enjoying today. Again, just fantastic concentration of chocolate flavors, pure 72% cacao, very top producer, really great quality, just a nice slow melt in your mouth. I wanted to give you something delicious there. So we paired it on this go around with one of my all-time favorite wine producers. This is Domaine de la Jeunesse, Chateauneuf de Pape, Vieille Vigne, 2019. This is Grenache-based Chateauneuf de Pape and the flagship cuvee of this top producer. Crushed black currants, garrigue, finesse and elegance on the palate. I always smell the stony nature of the Chateauneuf de Pape with these amazing stones that look like they've rolled hundreds of miles down from the Swiss Alps, because they did. They were part of the glacial movement. As the glaciers melted, they moved rocks all the way down from the Alps through the Rhone Valley, and they showed up at these perfectly rounded stones. They look like softballs, and the entire vineyard at this winery is just covered with these round stones called galets. And they've got these old vines that are 100 years old jutting out from the sea of galets, and they look like wise old storytellers, and they're just really, it's really a spectacular sight. This wine is mostly Grenache. Let me see if I can go onto my wine page and pull that out for us, the exact blend. $124 a bottle, $24.95. This is Domaine de la Jeunesse, Vieille Vigne, Chateauneuf de Pape. 65 Grenache, 20 Mourvèdre, 15 Syrah. Long term and large wood demi mood. That's 600-liter foudres, and it spends at least 12 months there. There is some stem inclusion involved in the production of this wine too, about 20% stem inclusion. Look at these scores: 98, 97, 97, 95. That is super highly thought of Chateauneuf de Pape from one of my favorite producers. Definitely on the riper spectrum of producers. I like them on both sides of the spectrum. Ones where the Chateauneuf de Pape producers not pushing ripeness and alcohol so high, but then on this side of the equation, you get something that's so complex with incredible fruit concentration. You cannot not like this wine either. And but I do like the vegetal ones as well that smell a little bit more like a vegetable garden. This one smells like a fruit salad. It's just super spicy, blue and black fruit skins. Really, really delicious. Before we move to our final chocolate, We did have the chocolate, didn't we? Yeah, we did that one. Talked about that. Here we go. Before we move to the final chocolate, I'm going to tell you that on this particular pairing, I kind of want to do like half the chocolate and half the cheese. Or you could have all the chocolate with this wine and half of the cheese, because we got one more chocolate after this for the final wine. Um, but the final wine, I want a little bit I want you to be able to taste it with the cheese and the final chocolate. So the Amade, devour with this one. It's kind of a bonus. I usually just show 3 cheeses and 3 chocolates, but I just really wanted to be able to let you enjoy this spectacular 85% cacao from Amade. They're one of the top producers in the world of chocolate. And this 85% is all Caribbean chocolate with volcanic terroir. And so that's one of the things that they do is really get focused on like a single site, and they're looking for dramatic character, dramatic quality, and they torture their beans. They take them through so many quality processes, and then once they get roasted and broken, then milled, it gets milled to a really fine level, like microscopic powder, and then introduced into the liqueur, and then continued to be processed like nobody else. They just make it so refined that if you put that 85 in your mouth, it takes an incredibly long period of time for it to start to melt. It has a crispness to it that snaps. There's very little sugar here, yet nothing bitter. And the wine that I'm pairing that 85 with is this ridiculous wine from the Vinge family called Igneous. It's a block of Cabernet off of their ranch in Calistoga. It just got 95 points and was a big star of Cabernet at my event called the Stars of Cabernet last week, 2 weeks ago now. I'm still recovering. We did that at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills, and we had 37 producers of top Cabernet, and this was one. I can't say it was my favorite because there were so many favorites that night. It was ridiculous. It was like just an unbelievable sea of great wine, but this was definitely one of the more popular ones, and so much so I brought it into the store after tasting it. I just think it explodes with this really incredible fruit, um, and the Venge touch is just exploring how concentrated, how rich, how luscious can you make Cabernet. And here he's using some really important sites. Larkmead Estate Vineyard Block 9 in Calistoga, Venge's Bone Ash Vineyard Block 2, and the Carvey Vineyard Diamond Mountain Estate in Calistoga. That's where that code comes from. In this blend, Igneous pays homage to the volcanic nature of Calistoga. So this is a very singular wine from a brand that makes a good number of different wines, but this is on their, I wouldn't say it's their most expensive either. I actually kind of thought, wow, that's a great wine for the money. So I was really impressed with that because we were in a room full of $200 Cabernets, and this one was about $100. So I just put it on the website. I have the $200 a bottle reserve as well, which quite frankly, I never get to taste. I get to buy it based on the ratings, and oh, Ian, you get 1 3-pack. So I have like 1 bottle, I think, of that left. It's just a teeny little part of what we do. but I also have the wine that we're tasting tonight. Sorry if I confused you. At $99. I mean, the score is almost the same, and the fruit here is just so lovely and intense and in your face. And it's just super great to have this. Now, I put it with a little twist to it. I think that they take it up at such a level that you could have it with something like a blue veined cheese. And so I wanted to see what your thoughts were if we tried it with the Stilton, because I almost feel like when I'm doing a port tasting and the port is real young and fresh, I feel like I'm tasting a young port. It takes me to a wine like this igneous, uh, in in that it's so fruit driven and so purely fruit skin and so saturated. And so we take it with a little cow's milk from England, where that's named after, I think I was doing a little dive on the history of Stilton, so I pulled this up. Hunting Dunshore, which this cheese was invented in the 18th century, and it was made at a little stagecoach stop. So it was really like a little artisan thing that kind of grew out of, you know, people talking about it. But the classic that it says originally made exclusively from the milk of uh shorthorn cows, as some still is. Stilton has a rich, intense flavor that is less salty than that of Roquefort. The texture is semi-soft and moist or creamy. Since this cheese is not pressed and it's ivory yellow in color, streaked with bluish green veins of penicillin, um, it's formed in cylinders, and in England, it's traditionally served with biscuits. So, what do you think? Do you like the chocolate with the wine or the Stilton? While you're tasting, I'm just going to talk to Setsuko in Japan really quick. I'm going to Tokyo next week. I'll be in Tokyo on the 21st or the 22nd. If you got that, let me know, Setsuko.
I think I'm going with the cheese.
And is that because the chocolate just didn't hold
No,
up?
I mean, well, I would say like my palate generally is more savory than, sweet. Not that this is sweet, but I don't know. I mean, if the chocolate's great too. I just kind of like the edge of the cheese, I think.
Mm. That cheese is awesome.
Yeah, they're both really great. They just kind of, with the chocolate, it almost has a little bit of like a coffee uh ness to it on that on your tongue at the end, you know? I don't know.
So the chocolate made it taste a little bit more like coffee.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which is, I mean, maybe the cocoa. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
think
seems
I don't hate either one. I mean, I don't hate it at all. It's all good.
What do you think, Kent?
I think the chocolate matches the finish of the wine more than the cheese does. There's a little bit of tannin of the wine matches the slight coffeeness of the chocolate.
Very good. So texturally, maybe the chocolate, but flavor wise, the savory is working for Natalie, and that's cool. I hope you enjoyed the Stilton. It is a classic blue. It's often thought of as like the official cheese for drinking port. But when they're talking about port, they're usually talking about like vintage port, old vintage port to go with their Stilton. Our final pairing tonight is a great one. And I wanted to celebrate Valentine's with a very special glass of wine. So I'm pouring the 50-year-old tawny from Kopke. This is a category that didn't exist 10 years ago. It is because back in the late 60s, early 1970s, there were a lot of issues happening in Portugal, very depressed moment for the currency. The vintage, they had really great vintages that they couldn't put in bottle as they just let them sit in wood for years. And they kept finding super high quality there. A lot of the houses were set to start bottling some of these vintages, and they realized it would probably be a better product to elevate their current tawny program, which was 10, 20, 30, or 40 years old, but now has been allowed to showcase a 50-year tawny port. We're going to have that with the John Kelly French Gray Sea Salt. I think it's going to rock. John Kelly has been a super high quality craftsman of chocolate and is very well distributed here in Los Angeles. I don't know how well they get out of Los Angeles, but I see them everywhere. Like in the most, is that John Kelly chocolate at the car wash? Is that John Kelly chocolate at the butcher store shop? So they've really got some good distribution here. You can find it, but not necessarily a huge selection. Usually it's like a piece. They do sell this chocolate one piece at a time, wrapped in foil. Today's box was like a little box kit. I got 4 pieces. The wine, mahogany color with greenish hues. Sign that it's very old wine, intense on the nose, remarkably complex, layers aromas of wood from its aging in barrel, notes of dried fig. They say snuff. I'm not sure if that's a description that makes it that translates well into English, but this is the English magazine Decanter. So I'm gonna say tobacco. So notes of dried fig, tobacco, white prunes, and walnuts. The palate reveals a fullness of great old port wine with ever-ending flavors that reveal how long it has aged in wood, such as spice and dried fruit, wrapped in fresher notes that culminate in a unique and endless finish. I love the way the sea salt on the chocolate lift the flavors of the chocolate. I think there's actually a saltiness to the wine as well. And I love the way these two kind of connect, and I hope you do as well. I'll admit that I've lost my Corvin, so I can't. I wanted to Corvin my Vengay, and I couldn't taste it with you. I was hoping that was great, so I'll do that after. I think it's packed in a box because I did a big show this week, and I have another one tomorrow, so it's probably packed with a bunch of stuff. It's not on the. It's not where it's supposed to be. The Kopke 50 comes in a nice box. Although I'll admit, Natalie, when we ship this out of state, we typically don't include the box, but if you want it, we just have to add another little box fee for that. And it does increase the cost of the shipping because they charge us based on the size of the box as well as the weight. But
Of course I do.
but the bottle is just pretty legendary. And once you open this bottle, it's already been oxidized for 50 years. This wine stays really sound for a very long time. I put a cork in it, put it in the refrigerator, and I like to serve it actually pretty cool. And I say the same thing whether it's the 30 or the 40 or the 50. But because they're introducing it right now, the 40 and the 50 are almost the same price. So it's really kind of a deal in the luxury world of collectible drinking. This would be a really nice topical find. Thank you all. You have a great night. And Satsuko, I hope I will see you in Tokyo. I'll be there on the 21st or the 22nd. I'll send you a note. And I thank you all. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Take care.